So we're gonna go to the front view by either hitting numpad 5, or if you, like me, don't have a numpad, just hit the tilde key to bring up the view menu, and from here we're gonna choose front. Now we're gonna get out of perspective view by hitting numpad 5 or this icon here that does the same thing. Now we're gonna load a reference image that I left for you in the description below. If you don't have it, just pause the video and go and get it. And once you do, let's hit Shift A to bring up the Add menu, go to Image, Reference, find the place where you saved your image, and load reference image. Now we're gonna go to the Image tab over here. On depth, we're gonna choose front, so our image comes to the front. We're gonna turn opacity on and lower it down till the reference is barely visible. For the head, we're gonna start with our default cube and we're gonna turn it into a sphere. So for that, we're gonna select it. We're gonna go to the Modifiers tab and we're gonna add a subdivision surface modifier, and I like to have mine with 3 subdivision levels on viewport and render. And right away, we're gonna go back to the viewport. We're gonna right click, shade smooth, and we're gonna hit tab to enter edit mode. We're gonna turn X-ray on from up here so we can select the front and back vertices at the same time. And we're gonna enter this menu here, go to X-ray, and turn the opacity all the way up. We're gonna add an edge loop in the middle, so let's hit Ctrl R. And once we get this yellow line, we hit enter twice to confirm. Now with the edge loop selected, we're gonna hit S to match the width in our reference. We're gonna click and drag to select the top vertices. We're gonna hit E to extrude them up and match the height. Let's hit S to scale them in. And now let's select this edge loop and hit S to match the width. For the body, we're gonna go to object mode. And with the head selected, let's hit Shift D to duplicate it and the S key to leave it there. Now we're gonna hit G and Z to move it down to where the body starts. We can hold Shift to move it slower. And we're gonna scale it down, but we're gonna change our pivot point first. So instead of scaling it like this from the origin point, we're gonna hold Shift and right click here where the body starts. And we can zoom into it with a bit more precision, but you don't really have to. We're gonna go up here to the pivot point menu and let's choose 3D cursor. Now we're gonna hit S to scale in and match the reference. We're gonna hit tab to enter edit mode. We're gonna drag to select the top vertices and we're gonna hit X to delete them. Now let's go to object mode and let's make the legs now. So let's hit Shift A. We're gonna go to mesh and add a cube. We're gonna hit G and move it down here to align the top right corner with the middle of the cursor, which is our current pivot point. And we're gonna scale in to match the width of the leg in our reference. Now we're gonna enter edit mode. We're gonna drag and select the top vertices and move them up with G and Z to match the height. And we're gonna do the same thing with the lower vertices. We're gonna hit Ctrl R to add an edge loop. We're gonna hit enter only once, and then we're gonna slide the edge loop down to align it to the top of the foot. And now we're gonna hit left click to confirm. I'm gonna turn my view a little bit. I'm gonna drag and select these 4 vertices. And I'm gonna hit E to extrude forward just a little bit. Let's hit the slash key to isolate. We're gonna add a middle loop, so let's hit Ctrl R and we hit enter twice. And we're gonna scale it on the y-axis with S and Y to give the leg more like a cylindrical shape. And from the top view, let's hit A to select everything, and S and Y to scale in just a little bit. Now we're gonna go to the Modifiers tab, add a Subdivision Surface modifier. We're gonna go back to our viewport and we wanna shade this object smooth. And if we were in object mode, we would just right click and find the shade smooth option there. But here in edit mode, we'll find the option in the face menu. So to get it, we just need to hit Ctrl F to bring up the face menu, which you could also find up here, and we choose shade smooth. To avoid having a round top like this, we're gonna drag and select the top vertices. We're gonna hit X to bring up the delete menu and select faces. We're gonna add a little bit of detail to the foot by adding an edge loop. So let's hit Ctrl R, hit enter once, and let's drag it down to about here. Left click to confirm. And from the top view, we're gonna select these vertices, hold shift, select these other ones, and we're gonna be scaling them in. But remember, we have the cursor as our pivot point, so if we do it now, this is what happens. So let's go to the pivot point menu, let's select medium point, and now we can scale in to make the foot a bit more rounded. And I might adjust this a little bit more by hitting G and Y. Now let's go out of the local view with the slash key and let's go to our front view. We're gonna go to the modifiers tab and add a mirror modifier. And we only see one leg because it got mirrored upon itself using the origin point as a pivot. To fix this, we're gonna go over here to mirror object. We're gonna click on the eyedropper and we're gonna click on the body so we can use it as the pivot point for mirroring. Now that the legs are done, we're gonna go to object mode, and from the left view, let's hit G and Y to move them back to about there. Now we're gonna continue with the eyes and we're gonna make them out of a cube. So let's hit Shift A, Mesh, Cube. We're gonna hit G to move the cube till the origin point is more or less centered with the eye on our reference. We're gonna add a subdivision surface modifier. Go back to our viewport, right click and shade smooth. We're gonna scale it down with S to match the size in our reference. We're gonna go to the left view, move it out of the head with G and Y. And we're gonna scale it only on the Y-axis with S and Y. We're gonna hit R and rotate it to match the angle of the head. And move it back a bit so we can place it over the head. Let's go to the front view. And we're gonna add a mirror modifier like we did with the legs. So let's select the mirror modifier. Let's click on the eyedropper and click on the head. To make the cheeks, with the eyes still selected, we hit Shift D to duplicate them and move them down. We hit S and scale them up. Let's go to the left view. We're gonna rotate them with R to align them to the head. Now we're gonna go to the top view and rotate again. And now let's hit G and Y and move them back. Maybe I'll rotate them a little bit more. Let's go back to the front view. And I'm gonna scale them up just a little bit more. For the wings, we're gonna duplicate the cheeks with Shift D. Hit Z to lock them to the Z axis. And we're gonna move them down till the origin point is more or less in the middle of the wing. We're gonna hit S to scale them in. We're gonna go to the bottom view and we're gonna bring them closer to the body. Let's rotate them and bring them in even closer. Now we're gonna go to the left view Maybe let's scale them in a little bit more so they don't overlap the head. I'm also gonna move them down just a little bit. And now let's enter edit mode. Let's hit Ctrl R to add an edge loop. Hit enter twice. We're gonna drag and select the lower vertices. Hit S to scale them in. Let's drag and select the top vertices and we're gonna scale them in, but just a little bit. Now let's go out into object mode. I'll move them down a little bit more. And let's go to the front view and hit R and Z to match the angle on the reference. Let's rotate them once more and scale them in if you want to. And finally for the beak, we're gonna select the eyes, Shift D, and bring the origin point to more or less the middle of the beak in our reference. And let's go to the modifiers tab and delete the mirror modifier by hitting this X icon here. Let's enter edit mode and let's scale it with S and X to match the width. Now let's go back to object mode, and with the beak still selected, we hold Shift and select the head. We're gonna go to the left view and hit the slash key to isolate them together. Now we can select the beak. I'm gonna bring it forward with G and Y, and I'm gonna rotate it to match the angle of the head. Now we're gonna make it bigger with S and Y. And the size of the beak is totally up to you. Let's go to the front view, hit slash key to get out of the local view, and I guess we have to go to the front view again. I'm gonna zoom in and match the beak to the reference a little bit better. For the lower part, let's hit Shift D and Z to lock it to the Z axis. Move it down to center the origin point with the middle of the lower part of the beak. Left click to confirm, and now we hit S to scale it in. And now that the Miniduck is modeled, we don't need the reference anymore, so let's select it and hit on this I button to hide it. For the background, we're gonna hit Shift A and add a plane. Let's go to the front view and let's hit G and Z to move it down right below its feet. We're gonna hit S and 10 to scale it up like 10 units or something. Let's zoom out. Let's enter edit mode. Let's drag and select these vertices on the back and hit E and Z to extrude them up. We're gonna go to the modifiers tab and we're gonna add a bevel modifier. On bevel amount, let's type 0.2 and give it like 20 segments. Let's go to object mode, right click and shade smooth. Let's go to the materials tab. We're gonna hit new to add a material to our background. I'm gonna name it BG. And we're only gonna change the color here. So I'm gonna click on this base color. And if you wanna use the same color I used, just type in this hex code. And you can't see the color right now because what we need to do next is change the viewport shading method from solid to material preview. Now to create the Play-doh material, we're gonna first select the head, go down here to the materials tab, and we already have the default material, so we're gonna use it as the base. I'm gonna change the name to Play-doh Yellow. We're gonna go up here between the viewport and the outliner, and when the mouse becomes this crosshair icon, let's click and drag to create a new window. On this new window, we're gonna change the editor type to shader editor. And I'm gonna hit N to hide this side menu. We're gonna first change the color, and if you want your Miniduck to look like mine, you can type in this hex code. Now we're gonna add a little bit of subsurface scattering. If you never heard of it, it's when the light passes through a translucent object and bounces inside, creating this kind of glowy effect. We're gonna add just a little bit, so let's go ahead and type in 0.1. And for the subsurface color, we're gonna use the same yellow we used for the base color. So for that, we're gonna hover over the yellow color. We're gonna hit Ctrl-C. Now we're gonna hover over the subsurface color and hit Ctrl-V to paste it. Now we're gonna add a Fingerprints texture. And I'm gonna leave the one I used linked in the description down below. So once you've downloaded it, we're gonna hit Shift-A, Texture, Image Texture. We're gonna drop it here. We're gonna hit Open and find the Fingerprints image. Let's open image. And we're gonna first plug it into our base color to see how it looks like, because we're gonna be making some adjustments. And it looks quite terrible, but because this texture is tileable, we don't need to UV map here. So to map our texture without using UVs, we need to add a texture coordinate node. So let's hit Shift-A, Input, Texture Coordinate, and we're gonna plug the object output into our image, which is gonna map the texture using the position of our object instead of the object 2Vs. And to get rid of the stretching here, we're gonna change the projection method in our image from flat to box, so Blender uses a box volume to project our image. Now the fingerprints are distributed more evenly, but the problem now is that we can see the edge of the box projection. So to fix that, we need to go to the image node and put the blend value all the way up to 1. And now that the texture looks good, we're gonna increase the fingerprint size. So for that, we need to add a mapping node. So let's hit Shift-A, Vector, Mapping. And we're gonna plug this in between these two nodes. So we can just drop it here. I'm gonna go down here to the scale values and I'm gonna try 1.5 and see how it looks like. And that looks like a good size. So the last thing we need to do is plug all of these nodes into a bump node, because the bump node is gonna give the impression that those fingerprints are really printed on the Miniduck. So for that, we're gonna hit Shift-A, Vector, Bump. We're gonna plug normal to normal. And now let's plug the color output of our texture into the height of the bump node. I'm gonna arrange these nodes a bit. And it seems like the fingerprints are coming out instead of going in. So to fix it, we're just gonna click on this box here that says invert. And I'm gonna lower the strength a bit, maybe something like 0.7 or maybe 0.5. Now in our fingerprints node, we're gonna change the color space from sRGB to non-color, because bump textures are always in grayscale. And the last thing we're gonna do is plug in the color output of our fingerprint texture into the specular input on the principal node, so now the light that gets reflected will follow the fingerprints details. And I'm gonna lower the distance value and see if this helps softening the bump a little bit. I'm gonna randomly try 0.5. So now that we have our basic Play-doh material done, let's go and assign it to our other objects. And you're gonna notice that when we do that, the fingerprints might change their size. You can already see they're smaller in the body. And an easy way to unify the scale is to join all the objects into one. So first we're gonna assign the material to each of the objects, and then we'll join them together into one single Miniduck. So let's select the eyes. Let's go to the materials tab, hit the browse button, and we're gonna select our yellow Play-doh material because we're gonna recycle it to make the eye material. And we see the number 3 here, which means the material is being shared by 3 objects. So we're gonna click on this number to make it a single user copy. Now we can change the name to Play-doh Blue. And we're gonna change the color. We're gonna hover over the color, Ctrl-C to copy it, hover over the subsurface color and Ctrl V to paste it. Now we're gonna select the cheeks, go to the Materials tab and select any of the Play-doh materials. Make a single user copy. Change the name to Play-doh Pink. Let's change the color. Let's copy it and paste it on the subsurface color. Select the beak. Assign a material to it. Create a single user copy. Change the name to Play-doh Orange. Let's change the color. And let's copy and paste the color into the subsurface color. We're gonna select the lower beak, assign the orange material to it, select the wings, let's give it the yellow material, and the legs, and I'll give them the orange material. Now that we're done, we need to join all our objects together. But before that, let's go ahead and apply all the mirror modifiers. So let's go to the Modifiers tab, click on this arrow and select Apply. The body doesn't have a mirror modifier, so let's select the wings, cheeks, and eyes. Now we're gonna hold Shift and select all of our objects. And now we just hit Ctrl J to join them all together. And I think the fingerprints look a bit small for what I had in mind. So I'm gonna go back to each of them and try a different scale value. I'm gonna try 0.1. And yeah, this looks better to me. Now I'm gonna go ahead and change the scale in all of them to 0.1. Now that our Miniduck is ready, let's go and set up the camera. So let's first jump to Output Properties over here. And I'm gonna change this Y value to 1920 because I like my renders to be square. Now let's hit this button to toggle camera view. Let's select the camera and we can do it from the outliner up here. Let's go back to our viewport, hit N to open the side menu. We're gonna change the rotation on Z to 0. And on X, we're gonna rotate the camera 90 degrees. So I'm gonna just type it in here. On location, we're gonna type in 0 on the X value to center the camera to the scene. And now I'm gonna change this editor to a 3D viewport. Let's go to our left view. I'm gonna hit G and place the camera over the Y axis. And I'll move it back with G and Y. I'm gonna hide this tab with N. Now for the render settings. Let's change the viewport shading up here. And if you can't see it, just hit the middle mouse button and drag to the left. And we're gonna switch from material preview to render so we can see things in real time. Let's go to the render properties over here. And I'm just gonna turn the ambient occlusion on. Bring the distance up to 1. To get more of the ambient occlusion effect. And down here on color management, I'm gonna change view transform from filmic to standard to get our colors to be more saturated. Let's jump to the world settings. We're gonna change the color to white. We'll lower the strength to something like 0.3 to give the scene a bit of ambient light. And for the lights, we're gonna go to our top view. We're gonna select our default light and we're gonna hit G to bring it forward and place it right on top of the camera. Let's go to our left view and lower it down. I'm gonna move it back a little bit more to where the camera starts. I'm gonna center it just a little bit more. Let's go to the light settings down here. Let's open shadow and let's turn on contact shadows. Now I'm gonna go to the left view. With the light selected, let's shift D to duplicate it, and we're gonna place it somewhere around here. On the light settings, we're gonna turn the power down to something like 500. And I'm gonna put the radius up a bit to get softer shadows. And now we're gonna duplicate our light one last time with Shift D and place it behind the Miniduck. We're gonna put the power up to 1000, and maybe we can select the background, go back to the bevel modifier, and maybe increase the amount of bevel to something like 0.5, so we get rid of that harsh shadow over there. Now you can hit this button to turn the overlays off, and this is exactly how your render is gonna look like. If you wanna render it out, just go to Render and Render Image.